It's Wednesday, and yeah, based on the topic, this is why I covered hot takes yesterday. Because I'm sick of the screaming. I'm sick of the fighting. I'm sick of the misery. I'm sick of nobody being able to just play a video game because it's fun and not overthink what it means for the human condition. Now, I overthink video games. I know I do. But for me, it's more overthinking it in terms of mechanics and how the story's told and how the story and character and gameplay mechanics and plot all sort of interweave and what it says about choice as opposed to the appearance of choice in games. That's my way of overthinking it. I'm not one of these, what do these female characters in games say about all women everywhere? And I've been focusing on bouncing around between TV shows and films and video games because I've noticed that even the most flawed shows on TV, even on premium cable, which again is primarily for male audiences, they've managed to create some really phenomenal female characters. What they do to them is a different story, but they've managed to create some really phenomenal female characters. And video games outside of RPGs are kind of a wasteland. We don't have Samus Arans today. We don't have, action heroes that are women. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But part of it is, I think that video game developers are scared to put women in their games because unless they make them super boring or very quote unquote normal looking, like Ellie in The Last of Us, people love Ellie from The Last of Us. They don't cosplay Ellie from The Last of Us because how do you cosplay Ellie? How? She doesn't have any identifying features. If you see the character, you recognize that's Ellie from The Last of Us, but even Lara Croft has a bow and arrow and a somewhat distinct costume. Ellie doesn't have that. She's not visually striking. It's her personality in the one game that makes people love her. The only one I can really think of is Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, and that's only been one game too, and RPG elements again. I mean, you get into Mass Effect, tons of female characters, Liara and Tali and all the different Asari characters. Liara's an Asari, but there are lots of female characters there. There are lots of female characters, interesting female characters in the Dragon Age games, or there were before that last game, dear God. But the same thing with Mass Effect Andromeda, it didn't really add anything. The more Sarkeesian BioWare got, the less compelling their characters got. Because the whole Tropes versus Women series only focused on the negative. And despite sometimes spending 40 minutes on a single topic, the analysis never went terribly deep. So a viewer was never really left with an understanding of an issue. There was no distinction between, for instance, the damsel in distress trope being overused in video games versus it being inherently bad. And so game developers just tried to avoid the whole thing so that, they just didn't get labeled by that's a Miss Male character. That's what is it? Women as background decoration. And that one particularly drives me crazy because any NPC, not even an NPC, because you can interact with NPCs, any of those civilians just walking around to populate a world, they're all background decoration, not just the women. If you're in a scene where it's the military and there's all these soldiers in the background, they're background decoration. They're not actually characters, they're extras. They're extras. That's what they're called. Not background decoration, extras. Extras. Let's not objectify human beings. The whole point was, it's objectifying women. No, it freaking wasn't. Extras are a different thing. But people nobody wanted to question because, oh God, she's a victim, don't you know? She's a damsel in distress. How dare you? How dare you victim blame? How dare you criticize her after all she's been through? Ironically enough, the woman that became known for criticizing the damsel in distress was one. But it's these kind of contradictions that no one dared question, that cause gaming to just become really not fun. And Anita Sarkeesian didn't do it herself. I mean, God, she's tried to go and do her own version of The Daily Show and that series she did on, women throughout history that, what was it, Forgotten Princesses or something like that? There's this really cool website that does little cartoons. Did it much better. Different female historical figures. Rejected Princesses, that's right. Great site. But she keeps coming back to gaming because it's a place people will pay attention to her. And I really only think that people pay attention because, to an extent, the awkward nerd stereotype is true in some cases. And a lot of guys in gaming are really self-conscious about not understanding women, and they think they can get an understanding of women from one particularly anomalous point of view. And this is the problem. Like, if you watch Tropes versus Women and think you understand what women want in video games and what bothers us in video games, you're not even scratching the surface. And in some ways, you're going the opposite direction. Because the idea that, women everywhere don't want, push-up bras and big busted women and things like that in their video games. There's a reason that sexy Halloween costumes are a thing, will forever be a thing. Women out there, those dynamic, more aggressive women who will play games like this are not offended by that stuff as long as it doesn't insult our intelligence. We can laugh alongside that because, we also realize that those big power armored dudes, the guys that are huger than huge, that's silly too. Like, guys don't look that way without steroids. And I don't think enough discussion has been had on how this sort of beefcake approach that guys more and more are expected to look like bodybuilders, even when they're not bodybuilders. Like, I'm concerned about that, because if I hear one more guy talking about his friggin' protein shakes and leg day, I think I'm going to scream. That's just, I cannot stand that stuff. I cannot stand gym culture, but other women think it's great because they're into the same thing. Again, not all women think alike. And instead of Tropes versus Women ushering in a golden age of diversity of thought in gaming, it really created a choke point. Like, everything, if you don't agree with Tropes versus Women, you're just wrong somehow, which doesn't make any sense because there's been no evidence that following the Tropes versus Women guidebook actually brings more women into games or makes us enjoy games more. It started a discussion, argument. I was willing to give that a chance. The problem is it didn't start a discussion. It started a war. And this is why I'm making this video. I'm tired of the war. I'm tired of everybody just screaming isms at each other. That's sexist. That's racist. That's this, that. And yes, Tropes versus Women didn't do that on its own, but it made it fashionable in gaming in a way that it's just not in other forms of media. You are able to discuss in challenging ways issues of race, issues of gender. If you're a fan of a show like, say, The Good Fight, which is a racially diverse cast, female forward, the fights don't break out about what's going on that show, because they have women and black people doing horrible freaking shit to each other. And it's very nuanced. You're allowed to talk about that stuff without being branded a racist or a sexist in a way that you can't do in anything nerd. Anything nerd. And that's part of what I've been checking out. Was it just gaming? No, it's nerd TV shows. It's nerd movies. It's everything nerd. And that is going to kill the enjoyment of this stuff. Now, nerds have always loved to fight. And I say this as one who had to watch this tendency in myself step away. And man, once you step away like that, you can't go back in. It all seems really stupid. But we're super invested in being right in a way that other people aren't. Like if somebody starts fighting a regular person about a TV show or something, it's like, that's just my opinion and that's the end of it. People will not fight to the death to prove they're right the way nerds do. And again, I say nerd as if I'm because I'm one of them. But I do find it extremely interesting that you talk to fans of that, 911 show with Jennifer Love Hewitt and Angela Bassett. The Good Fight fans, regular TV fans, even like NCIS fans. That's the military. People don't go to war over depictions in these shows. Blue Bloods tackles some pretty tough stuff. The intelligentsia dismisses that show as garbage, but actually it's pretty good. I kind of like it. You don't get the fighting. You don't get the warring in fans of these shows the way you do in something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Game of Thrones and video games and all that stuff. Because there isn't the tokenism of opinion and of thought when it comes to these more mainstream shows. A friend of mine who's very smart person when it comes to human behavior in fandom. He's been around, he's an author and all that stuff. He said that fans of things come at it from a very juvenile, very personal place. There is no separation between what they like, what they watch, and what they are. It is their identity. So instead of, friend of mine preferring JAG to NCIS, and we're like, oh, that's funny, we'll watch both. There's these wars. We can't talk about this stuff like sane, mature human beings because everything is a zero-sum game. Longtime watcher Oron Darklord identified the zero-sum game in gaming. It applies to all fandom. It applies to all fandoms. I wanted to be sure about that. No, it does. It's really no different because there's a lot of crossover, right? There's a lot of crossover between people who watch superhero movies and people who watch, Westworld and Game of Thrones on premium cable and people who play video games. Why? Because they're all primarily aimed at adult male audiences. And that is just what it is. Some people argue that stuff for white, straight, cis men is so demonized now that that's where the fighting comes from. That may very well be true. That may be a huge portion of it, which series like Tropes versus Women don't help with. But I think it goes deeper than that because, yes, it's true that premium cable is still aimed at men and video games, AAA video games, are still overwhelmingly a male audience the way that network TV isn't. That skews 35 plus women now because of advertising. And movies, it depends on the movie. They now want broad sweeping appeal. They want movies for men that women will go see. There's a real split internationally. The fact that Asia is now relevant in movies means that female characters are going to become more dominant because the Japanese don't really give a damn about movies unless they have a female main character. Not because Japan is a particularly enlightened culture as far as women are concerned. That's just their media traditions. It's different. Which is also why there's a lot more female characters in Japanese video games. And that was a major weak spot in the Tropes versus Women videos, is they showed there was no culturally relativistic analysis of Asian games. And the symbols don't mean the same thing in in Japan, the purpose of media isn't the same. You know, I remember attending a lecture put on by the Japanese Cultural Center where they talked about the significance of cherry blossoms on snow-capped mountains in Japanese entertainment. And the significance of that is that's impossible. Cherry blossoms wilt in the cold. So if it's cold enough for snow, you don't have cherry blossoms. So the minute you see cherry blossoms on a snow-capped mountain, that's a Japanese media thing going, this isn't real. This isn't intended to reflect reality. This is displacement. It is displacement of reality, not reflection of reality. And every time Tropes versus Women went after a Japanese game, it missed that. It is not intended to reflect real women. That is Western media theory. That is not Eastern media theory. But now we have Sony telling primarily Asian games, you can't put any of the fan servicey stuff in your games anymore, which is rampant in Japan. That's just a thing. They're not terrified of sex in media the way we Westerners are. And, you know, now they're saying you can't put any of it in. And the Sony thing, it's taken me a long time to talk about the Sony censorship thing because I've wanted to be sure about this. It really does seem to me that, and a few people I know over who are working over there have said they just don't understand the freaking out in the West. And they don't want to offend. And so they're taking the word of, you know, Sony moved its head offices to California. They're taking the word of the Californians. Somebody better explain why that's a problem. It's California, man. But they're just listening to them, not questioning it. Fine, whatever, we're taking it out. But I think that the thinking behind that is embedded in criticism like Tropes versus Women instead of an analysis of what women are actually watching and want to watch. I mean, Girls was never a huge ratings draw, but, you know, it was made for women and feminist blogs were all about it. It was full of sex. Game of Thrones, full of sex. Westworld, full of nudity. Shows like The Good Fight, full of sex. Television aimed at like Sex and the City. Sex is in the title. These successful shows for women are full of sex. So this idea that women are somehow put off by sex or nudity or anything like that is wrong. It's just completely wrong. There is evidence that it's wrong. If women want sexual content in our games and you are removing the sexual content to appeal to women, this is going to backfire on you. And this was pretty much the message of Tropes versus Women is any woman who kind of looked identifiably like a woman was bad somehow. That was a joke, obviously. You know, come on. Hopefully, I've forgotten that people don't understand sarcasm and humor and all that stuff anymore. But the stuff that is primarily romance novels are primarily consumed by women. Romance novels are smut novels. It's not really romance. It's a bunch of boinking with flowery language. Somebody pointed out in the comments, I know it's not Feedback Friday, but in the comments to the thing I did on Monday, that yes, there's a lot of male pen names or male sounding names by women in sci-fi and fantasy novels. Romance novels, men use female pen names to write romance novels. They play with that on Legends of Tomorrow. Great freaking show. That's true because women are dominant in the romance genre. And that's full of smut. It's smut. It's full of smut. There's varying degrees of smut, but it's smut. So this idea that women are just put off by sexual themes or beautiful women, or it's just not true. The way it's depicted, the focus is different. But I mean, the Dragon Age romances were so popular with women that I remember that first game came out, you know, morons would tell me, oh, of course you like Dragon Age, you're female. No, the player base was still predominantly male. But romance is seen as for women. Well, if you take out sexual themes, then you take out an element of the romances that women want. Women want, on average, more story stuff. I'm an anomaly, and I have to keep that in mind with my analysis. I can't just put my own likes and dislikes into my analysis of stuff. I have to actually look at the overall trends, and I'd prefer a lot less sex on TV just because I think it's badly handled, but people freaking love it. They love it, and who am I to say they're wrong? And that's the problem. Tropes versus Women pretty much says they're wrong. And so it pushed all of gaming in the wrong direction because game developers did not approach it scientifically. They just freaked out and stuck their head in the sand and like, don't yell at me. And they thought that this atypical group of women who were advocating this desexing of games. They thought that they represented the majority of women. They don't. They don't. If that were so, all the stuff aimed at women would look totally different. I mean, God, there's a panel at Anime North every year about yaoi manga and yaoi anime, which is, gay manga. It's all women. It's all women. Women are fascinated by sex. And men are fascinated by sex, but in a different way. And because Tropes versus Women was a mile wide and inch deep, we've been going the wrong way in gaming for a good 5 years now. Now, some companies are really trying to go the opposite direction without upsetting the Sarkeesian acolytes within their ranks. And I'm not going to get into more of that because this stuff was told in confidence. So I'm not going to talk about who told me and where it was, but it's more than one major developer. Far more. There are real issues with any woman who tries to refute the stuff that Tropes versus Women says, getting dismissed as, you just want to be more appealing to men, or you just want to be popular, or all that stuff. It's like, are you kidding? We're arguing the majority of you that is being treated like a minority of you. That doesn't make you popular. It's the opposite. Male game developers want it to be simple. Unfortunately, a lot of these guys still have it in their heads that women are destroyers of fun. Anything that guys like, women are not going to like. And so it embedded because Tropes versus Women confirmed their preconceived notions about women being destroyers of fun. So when women come along and say, no, we don't have issues with that. We have no problem knowing men like sex. We do not find the male sex urge something scary or inherently predatory. We just don't want it to be totally guy vision in those scenes. There are subtle little ways, and I can talk more about that, but nobody cares right now. Nobody cares right now because we're just taking all the fun, all the adult fun, not the violence, just the sex, out of games on the say-so of Tropes versus Women. And that would be fine if it was right, but it's not. And we are now in the unfortunate place of having to prove something that has really taken hold. And we have and took hold before Tropes versus Women existed. I really think, again, it was popular because a lot of these guys in game dev, they secretly believe that women are destroyers of fun. Trust me, I've seen the look of terror when I start talking to them about things and I'm passionate about things and I know a thing or two and they start to feel useless because, they can't mansplain something to me and be useful. Again, a joke. Don't get mad at me for using the term mansplain. See how touchy everybody is? I cannot stand this. I cannot stand this. We should be able to just chuckle at this stuff. And the more I've been going out and doing the live comedy, the more trouble I've been getting into online Because the way people talk online, the way people listen online, it's not the way people do it in the real world. Not everybody is so freaking fragile in the real world. They're able to just sort of chuckle and accept the meaning of, yeah, you were saying something in a sort of a facetious term to make a point. That terms like mansplaining kind of get in the way too. But we all sort of chuckle about it because whatever, it's not that important to most people. And this is the problem, that these preconceptions fed by tropes versus women have made it even harder now to get us on the right track, which is not censorship to not offend the sensibilities of destroyers of fun women, but inclusion. You know, it's not about not showing sex. It's about showing sex in a way that includes many perspectives instead of just one. Making sure that depictions of, you know, beautiful women and, you know, well-endowed human beings, you know, whether it be giant pectoral muscles or big boobs or, you know, a big ass, that's done respecting people who look like that and people who don't look like that, having different body types in a game, making everybody feel like they're included somehow. And this is more important for some people than others. It's by high school, it's much more important for women than it is for boys, for girls than it is for boys. The data's out there, but the problem is game developers aren't looking at the data because, oh, they watch Tropes versus Women, so now they think they know it all. And if a game developer's watching, no, you don't. A lot of that thinking was like pre-1990s stuff. Like it barely even incorporated Judith Butler. It was not great on queer theory. It wasn't intersectional at all in terms of, you know, different experiences of women of color. It was really, really dated. And so unfortunately, gaming is now approaching depictions of women from a 1990s paradigm. Without all the fun, without all the Riot Girl stuff, right? They stripped all the Riot Girl out of 1990s thinking, because this is 1990s academia, not pop culture. And we're going to have to undo the last 7 years now, because it's all wrong. I mean, not being too reliant on a single narrative trope, yeah, that's usually a good idea, but people really had to be told, don't tell the same story over and over and over again. If that's true, that's really pathetic. That's really sad. And I do think that all these arguments about depictions are covering up and have covered up workplace abuses and the fact that the lack of job security in gaming really isn't fair to anybody, men included. There's no reason that people working on a successful franchise should ever be worried about losing their jobs. You know, that's just exploitation of the workforce. And I really think we are getting into an era where the actual treatment of real people in gaming is finally taking center stage. But it's doing it in a way that I'm afraid is also going to be counterproductive. Because if you look at a lot of union trades, manufacturing, Hollywood, which is, you know, actress, SAG is the one chomping at the bit. SAG and the AFL-CIO are both chomping at the bit to get into gaming, right? What's another heavily unionized? You think of any unionized trade. Who do you think of? A white guy, right? There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Other than teachers' unions. Most unionized trades have been notorious for their sexism and racism. And this is something we cannot avoid looking at when we talk about gaming unionizing. It's a problem. You know, wow, the Screen Actors Guild did such great protection of women within their ranks. Sarcasm. And this is my concern about going into the union debate while we've got a Marxist framework on depictions of women and minorities and all that stuff. It's gonna be disastrous if we don't really isolate what we're talking about here and really see the flaws in the models that people are suggesting. And we can't do that if we're still just, show me a video series that has all the right answers. It's not that simple. We need a plurality of voices on every subject. And we really do need to do some policy work, which we don't have the framework to do. So I'm going to leave it there because that was a half hour. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching.